Hello and welcome to This Week in Property. I'm your host, Richard Swan, and in today's show, we have a gentleman from a company that, if you're keeping up to date with all the shows, it's actually a company we featured recently. Just a couple of shows back, a couple of weeks back, we had a gentleman called Kishan Cavey from a company called Bonham and Brook. Now, Bonham and Brook have got so many experts. We've actually got another one. So Kishan was helping you all with the intricacies and a lot of the benefits that you can get through Bonham and Brook to do with stamp duty. But today, Mark Anthistle, who's on the show, he's going to help us with a different area. So first of all, Mark, welcome and thanks for being on the show today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Really looking forward to this chat. And it's a funny one because Mark, ladies and gentlemen, is the Capital Allowances manager at Bonham and Brook. So that's the chat that we are going to be having today. And all the links, as usual, to the website, to forums and stuff that we're going to be discussed, they're all inside the show notes. So once you've listened to the show, definitely go in there and have a kind of click on things. But Mark, let's get to meet you first of all, because we're going to be chatting all about Bonham and Brook, how you can help people, capital allowances, that theme, that topic in general. But what's your story? What's Mark's story? Because you've got quite a lot of experience in the world, in the property world, tax world, etc. How would you kind of summarise your journey up to being with Bonham and Brook itself?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So, I mean, nobody grows up to want to be in tax, but that's where I ended up. So, I mean, in a previous life, I was trained to become a quantity surveyor. And unfortunately, I was one of the casualties of the recession around 08, 09. So I was actually made redundant at that point. Had a few jobs here and there, just paying the bills. I got to a point where I decided, well, what do I want to do? What do I like doing? And I eventually got a role working with a tax specialist that specialises in capital allowances. When I started off, I didn't know anything about capital allowances, knew very little about tax. But the experience there was great, and the company grew, and I grew with the company that I was with, and my experience just carried on growing to the point where the opportunity came up to become the Capital Allowances manager here at Bonham and Brook, and it was too good an opportunity to turn down, so I took it. And that's where I am now.
Fantastic, that's brilliant. I can't believe people don't grow up wanting to be involved in tax. I mean,
No.
what
Strange.
what is HMRC doing? I mean, they need to have better adverts.
Yeah, so the marketing campaign they've missed out on somewhere.
That's it. Well, listen, capital allowance. Here's a funny thing I've noticed with those two words. People in property, for some reason, people in property investors, developers, buyers, whatever you want to call it, if I mention those two words or people hear them getting tripped off the tongue, there's a hesitancy. It's almost as if ears close down. It's like, oh no, this is too complicated. It's too much of a dark art. I can't understand it. I can't get my head around these things. It's just no for me. It's not even worthwhile me looking into it. It's too complex. You know, there's a strange, really strange hesitancy. And today, our show, we're going to be chatting all about this because I want those ears opened. And in fact, I'm going to help the viewers, the listeners today just now, because this man, Mark, here in front of us, he's so much experience, right? A fantastic bio. I'm going to pull a wee section out of this man's bio that's going to help you because you are really wanting to open up your ears. Over the years, Mark Anthistle has compiled more than 1,000 successful valuations, okay? And that's across all sorts of different industries. That has resulted in identifying over £300 million worth of unclaimed capital allowances. And here's a real important figure. That then led to Mark being able to secure over £60 million worth in tax relief for clients. Yes, savings, folks. Have your ears open now? Tax relief. That's why you need to understand all this stuff, and you need to have experts on your side like Bonham and Brook. So, Mark, those special two words, capital allowances, that make people kind of switch off and draw back. How do you go about explaining that at a high level? You know, what is that people need to understand? What is capital allowances?
So I mean, your average accountant, they will claim capital allowances as on your day-to-day sort of businesses on assets that you acquire. to run the business. So it'd be things like a computer or desk or chairs or beds, etc. So if you acquire those assets, your accountant will identify those costs as qualifying for capital allowances, and you'll get that knocked off your tax bill at the end of the year.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that those are sort of assets that we're talking about there, that the individual loose items, there's not significant value in those items when comparing it to an actual commercial property and the amount of tax relief that's available in the commercial property. So you could buy assets in a year that maybe add up to £20,000 and you get the tax relief on that. But if you've got a commercial property that you bought for over £1 million, there could be some tax relief in there that's significantly more than the actual assets you're buying that go in that property. The issue that accountants have is that they will be able to identify costs that qualify for things like computers and desks and chairs, etc., because they will qualify in full. They don't require any sort of specialist input. The problem you have with a property is not that entire property qualifies for capital allowances, and HMRC don't just let you claim a nominal percentage. You've got to do a proper assessment of that property to work out what the value of that property or the expenditure you've incurred on that property actually qualifies for tax relief. And that's where someone like us comes in. We've got the necessary skills and tools to be able to do that for you. And it's not just necessarily property acquisitions, it could be a build project as well. If you've done a significant build project, that again will have an element which will qualify for capital allowances, but it's something that accountants, they don't, it's not that they're necessarily doing anything wrong, it's just they've not got the necessary skills to do it. One of the analogies we use is if you go to your GP and you've got a back problem, they may refer you to a chiropractor who's a specialist in that area of the body. It's the same as us. An accountant, they're like your GP, they've got an overall understanding of your accounts and tax services, but they're not a specialist in capital allowances, so they refer to someone like us who are a specialist. It's not to say they can't, like I say, they're not doing anything wrong. They're just advising their clients correctly and offering the best service that they can. We work alongside accountants and not against them. So that's generally what we look to do. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's a specialist area. I love that. You've got your
Yeah.
accountant, as you say, that general accountancy, keeping you right, giving you updates, P&Ls, balance sheets, all sorts of good stuff. Very essential, of course. But when we start to veer off into certain things, oh, for this project, I really need a VAT specialist. Oh, for this one here, I really need a capital allowances specialist, whatever it is, and you have that person in your team, you have them in your phone, so they're ready. You bring them in and they then do their magic. They work on their stuff. And I think you're right. I think the part about it's not just a percentage thing. You can't just, oh, I'm going to claim this back from HMRC. No, 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 no. You really need to dig into the nitty gritty. I think that's number one, why a lot of people kind of push back from it and think, oh, it's just not worth the hassle. It's too complicated. It's a dark art. But number two, that's also why you need people at Bonham and Brook, because that's what they do. That's what they can actually focus in on and end up can save you a lot of money, which is incredible. Talking about analogies and metaphors and stuff, I love the piece that you've put in your documents, and folks, you've got access to this on the show notes page. There's a line that says, basically, this is anything that would remain within the property if you turned it upside down and gave it a shake. I think that's brilliant because it helps us get, clear away the mystery and the magic of it all. And we can start to think about things like, what are we talking? We're talking heating, electrics, plumbing, air conditioning, all sorts of things involved with commercial properties.
Yeah, generally that kind of sums it up. So
Right.
if you virtually picked up your property, turned it upside down and shook it, everything that fell out was probably something your accountant would have claimed on because it's all the loose stuff. Anything that remains within the property that's not structural itself.
Yeah.
So you can't get walls or windows or doors or roofs or foundations or anything like that. But anything fundamentally within the property that's fixed to it is generally qualifying. So like you say, the heating, the electrics, lighting, plumbing, sanitary, kitchens, carpets, fire alarms, intruder alarms, lifts, things like that are all qualified for capital allowances. And when you add them up, when you consider an entire property, they can become quite an substantial cost that could qualify for tax relief.
Yeah, exactly. It can become some big numbers, depending on what we're talking about there. Yeah, absolutely. Service accommodation. You know, it kind of a big hot topic these days. Quite a fad in some ways. A lot of people think, but loads of cash flow, loads of investors getting really involved with it. And then some understand, don't understand. It might look like a residential property, but actually, because the way you're operating it, actually leans into the commercial part of the world. Is this another area where, capital allowances we can get a benefit from as well as an investor?
Potentially. So if the property operates as what's called a FHL, a first holiday let,
Hmm.
you can get tax relief based on that. But interestingly, today in the budget, it was announced that the FHL regime is being withdrawn.
Right,
So I'm not sure exactly how that works for capital allowances at the minute. It may
right.
be that those properties are no longer deemed commercial at all, and you can't get any tax relief on them. I'll have to have a look after this and fully understand what the Chancellor's announced today to make sure we're absolutely correct in our understanding. But that's the initial impression that I get, is that they are looking to move away from hot furnished holiday lets
Right.
and trying to encourage more long-term lets and help sort of the residential situation that we've got at the minute. So I
Yeah.
think going forward, it may be that things like served accommodation, there may not be any tax relief available on those sort of properties, but it's something to keep an eye on in the next sort of few days, definitely.
Yeah. Hot off the press stuff. There you go. Poor Mark.
It is, yeah, it is. It was looking like a very quiet budget from Capital Allowances point of view, but then he threw that spanner in the works late on. So
Uh,
it's definitely something we'll have to have a proper read up on once we've finished.
Brilliant. Just when you thought you could leave the office early today. Yeah, that's the good old Chancellor. The poor man. But do you know something? The part of that is really interesting, the fact that it's, we're recording this right on the day of the budget and these things coming out and stuff. But the other part of it is this shows exactly why you need people at Bonham and Brook on your side, because stuff's always changing. The law's always changing, tax is always changing, the way we can account for things are always changing. That's why you need these specialists just on hand. You've got your letting agent, for example, keeping on top of all the law and stuff if you're renting out a place. Brilliant. But Bonham Brook, specialist with stamp duty, with capital allowances, you're keeping on top of all this stuff so that you can best advise and best guide people going forward. I mean, that must be quite a varied and challenging job for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the last couple of years, especially since COVID, it
Mm,
seems to be every budget they bring something new out that changes the capital allowances regime. So the last year, the full expensing was brought out.
mm.
Before that, there was super deduction and a special rate allowance. There's an annual investment allowance which allows you to claim up to £1 million in a year, all in one go, without having to claim it over a number of years.
Wow.
That's changed. The threshold for that has changed nearly every year since 2008. So it's finally fixed on £1 million.
Right.
It was as low as £25,000 at one point. So you only got sort of 100% relief up to your first £25,000 that you spent. So gladly, thankfully now it's fixed itself at £1 million. But yeah,
Right.
it's constantly changing. Like I said today, it sounded like it was going to be a quiet one for capital allowances. The only sort of big announcement was that full expensive was going to extend to lease assets as well as owned assets.
Yeah.
It's just the intention to bring that in, but that's sort of like the most quiet thing that's happened today. And then obviously later on he mentioned the FHL changes. So yeah, it's constantly changing. I mean, for us it would be good if it did settle down for a bit and just stay sort of as it is for a bit, and we can just allows us to digest things and get things in motion without it all changing again 6 months later.
Exactly. Well, they're certainly keeping you on their toes, that's for sure. And you mentioned at the start that you can actually help out in a lot of different phases of people. And what I mean by that is it could be the actual acquisition of the property that you can help to have a look at things. It might be building or extending on that existing property. It might be the refurbishment of the property. Maybe you're already, the kind of freeholder, if you like, but you've got a kind of corporate thing in place that you're getting ground rent. There's all sorts of different life cycles of the property that you can help with. Is that the case?
Yeah, so like I say, we look at all sort of projects that you may be involved in, whether it's a property acquisition or it could be a build project or like I say an extension or a refurbishment of an existing property. We look at all sort of projects to
Mhm.
make sure that the capital allowances available have been maximised and claimed in full. Yeah.
Right, excellent. And the people involved, that, let's say, oh, I've got a limited company that I've got this property, or oh no, we're a partnership, or oh no, I've got this one in my own individual name. Anything we need to know there? Can you help all of those people?
Yeah, so capital allowances are generally available to any sort of UK income tax or corporation taxpayer. So
Right,
it's not restricted. There are some allowances that are only available to corporation taxpayers,
right.
but the majority of the allowances available are available to any sort of UK business.
Hmm.
So, like I mentioned, full expensing that is only currently only available to corporation taxpayers. So, full expensing is basically if you acquire some new plant in a year, then you can claim 100% of the cost on that plant, so long as it relates to a certain pool. So there's two, basically going back to the start. There's two main pools which capital allowances are put into. So there's the main rate pool and there's a special rate pool. So things like carpets, kitchens, fire alarms, fitted bars, intruder alarms, things like that, they would go in the main rate pool because they're not meant to last the entire life of the property. They will get replaced over time. And then things like heating, electrics, aircon, lifts, lighting, they will go in the special rate pool because they're supposed to last a bit longer within the building.
Right.
And generally, they're written down at slower rates. So the main rate pool is currently 18% a year you get. So everything you have in that pool in a given period in a year, you
Hmm.
get 18% of that in a year. And then for a special rate pool, that's 6%. So it's quite low in terms of how much of the pool you can claim each year. So there are special first year allowances available, like annual investment allowance and full expensing, which allow you to claim 100% of the cost in that year.
Wow.
Yeah, in the year the expenditure is incurred. So it is good to have. So if you're constructing a property and you spend, or even just refurbishing a property, maybe you spend £100,000 on a new air conditioning system. Full expensing and annual investment allowance allow you to claim that cost in one go and knock that off your taxable profits for the year, rather than just claiming 6% a year,
Hmm.
which is obviously a very slow sort of process in terms of
Yeah.
getting the benefit from that. So yeah, so they're the sort of things that we look at and try and maximise for the client.
Yeah, fantastic. And there's some amount of savings that are available that people really need to hook into this and tap into you guys and girls so that you can see what's available, because the more that you can reclaim back, the more you can get a better return on things, the better your asset is going to be, the better the cash flow is going to be, the better your business is going to be. It's so, so important. It really is crucial. And that's why it's great having you on the show. When it comes to timing, when and when should I not get in touch with Bonham and Brook? What I mean is, let's say I've already got a property. Okay, so I can now talk to you guys and maybe have a wee look at it. What if I'm maybe just in the process of, yeah, it looks as if I'm about to purchase that? Can I get in touch with you at that stage, or do you need me to become the official owner first? What's the best thing to do?
I mean, if you already own a property, then get in touch with us now. We can have a look at when you did acquire the property, what allowances may be available to you.
Hmm.
If you're looking to buy a property, I would get us involved at the earliest stage possible.
Right.
The reason I say that is because the legislation actually changed in 2014. So prior to 2014, if you acquired a commercial property, all you had to do was establish that nobody prior to you had claimed capital allowances on the plant in that property and the
Right.
fixtures. If you could establish that nobody else had claimed, then you're entitled to make an unrestricted claim yourself
Hmm.
based on your own purchase expenditure. So it's quite simple to claim if you can establish that no one else had claimed,
Hmm.
which required a bit of digging on our part. But once we established that, you could then make a claim yourself.
Hmm.
What happened in 2014 is they changed it and said that any property acquired after March 2014, if the previous owner was entitled to claim capital allowances, they have to claim them and pool them and either dispose of them when they dispose of the property to the buyer or retain them or split them with the buyer. They
Hmm.
basically said that the allowances had to be dealt with there and then, and if they
Ah,
didn't, they get lost. So there's a
screwball.
2 year deadline from the date you buy the property to agree in the capital allowances between the buyer and the seller.
Right.
So the sort of vehicle of doing that is an election. So it's an election under Section 198 of the Capital Allowances Act, which is like an agreement between both parties to say this is the amount of capital allowances that the seller is transferring to the buyer. and entitled the buyer to claim them going forward. If that election is not done, then any allowances available to the seller are lost if you don't do it within 2 years. So any properties now bought February 2022 backwards, if the capital allowances haven't been dealt with, they've been lost. So what we do is to get us involved at the earliest possible stages is what we would advise, because we can ensure that capital allowances are dealt with properly in the contract, in the transaction, and we can put the necessary clauses in to make sure that they are addressed and not forgotten about. Because we've got so many cases where we've got a client who's acquired a property. It's been over 2 years. The seller was entitled to claim capital allowances, and we just have to say, unfortunately, all the allowances have been lost now. And you can go back and tell them, well, this is how much we think you would have got based on the information we've got, and then the amount that's being lost now is just ridiculous, because it's not being dealt with properly at the point of the transaction.
Oh my goodness, all that money lost, sitting on the table, ready to be picked up, and no one came for it. You see, that's why you folks listening have got to get in touch with these guys. Make sure you've not left money on the table. Otherwise, it's just going to fall off the side, and we don't want that. We don't want that for investors, that's for sure. And the actual process itself, do I go to the site, because the links are here, and then just book in a call with you? Is there like a first stage call, and then I have to pay a fee? And then do you need certain documents? What would you prepare me for if I'm trying to work with you guys?
Yes, I mean, we'd have a sort of like an initial call with you to find out a bit of information about the property itself, the history of the property. And then we can go and do a bit of research ourselves. There's various sites and publications out there that provide information that we use, things like Land Registry, or Registers of Scotland, for example, Companies House, things like that. So there's number of ways we can ascertain certain information. And from that, we can give you an idea straight away of this is how much we think you may be available to you. From that, we'll then complete our full due diligence of the property. We'll get information from their accountants, from their solicitors. We'll get purchase documents, purchase missives, tax computations to fully understand the current tax position of the company and the position of the property itself. And from that, we may survey the property. So we'll come out, send a surveyor out to the property, take some measurements and lots of photos and an inventory of what's actually in the property. And then from that, we will generate the capital allowances claim using existing cost models, etc. And put that together in a nice, concise valuation report, which we'll then issue to the client and their accountant, and then the accountant will make the necessary submission to HMRC to get their tax back. That's the sort of our process in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There's a lot of fantastic assistance work done, hand holding getting done. You're obviously very, very familiar with the whole process. You know exactly what the likes of HMRC are looking for, and that then helps the investor, the owner, the accountant, even at the end of it as well. Just no end. That's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
now,
we try to keep their involvement to a minimum as well. Obviously,
yeah,
we know their business and doing whatever they're doing. So
yeah,
we don't want to be on the phone 24/7 asking for information. So we will try to keep their involvement to a minimum, try and do as much of the work we can ourselves, and we'll go directly to the accountants and solicitors to keep them busy doing what they want to be doing, which is running their business. Yeah.
Yeah, tremendous. I'm going to tap into your personal experiences now, your kind of opinions and things that you've seen and not seen. The kind of challenges you've came across, was there a particular case or property or situation that comes to mind that, wow, that was a cracker actually to try and unravel, or it was really difficult, or HMRC were pushing back on me time and time again? Anything at all that pops to mind there? And then on the good side, the positives, the satisfaction, it was great when we managed to achieve this thing or this milestone. Anything that pops into your mind when it comes to those things?
I mean, nothing specific. I mean, we've done some interesting cases over the years. What we done run a couple of years ago involving a grain silo. So sort of really bespoke sort of property that we did a claim on. So essentially, there was a case that went to a tribunal. And the actual taxpayer won the case against HMRC to argue that their grain silo, the whole entire building, could be argued to be a piece of plant.
Wow.
So we were an accountant got in touch with us and said that, are you aware of this? Firstly, are you aware of this case? And then secondly, if you are, I've got a couple of clients that may also have grain silos that will fall into this scenario. So it was a very interesting case to see. Firstly, reading up on the actual case to see how the actual building itself could be argued to be a piece of plant. So it was certain things like the thickness of the floor slabs that incorporated a ventilation system. The structure itself was more solid to hold all this grain. It had special moisture resistant cladding, things like that. The pitch of the roof was slightly extended to allow for a gantry. There's all these wonderful things in the building that made it more than just a building. So reading the case law and applying that to the properties that we viewed ourselves was quite an interesting sort of interesting case to work on. Yeah, it's quite enjoyable putting that all together.
Yeah. Do you enjoy that part of it? I mean, you're almost like a detective. You know, you're picking away at things and then trying a scenario and then picking away for some more information. Is that part of the thing that floats your boat, if you like, with your work?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a sort of like analytical brain, so I like
Yeah.
doing things like that and looking into things. I mean, I see things always as black and white. There's tends to not be many grey areas with me, apart from what hair I've got left. But the and that's the kind of the thing with capital allowances. It is more of a black and white sort of regime. It's
Right.
either qualifies or it doesn't. There's very few grey areas, but it is interesting to view some of the areas that are grey and try and determine whether it's qualifying or not.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the time it can be an interpretation of the legislation, how you see it.
Sure.
And if you see it a certain way, have you got enough to argue it if it comes to that?
Yeah, exactly. See, on the legislation front, there's a thing. Is there anything that bugs you about things that you wish would be changed? You know, it's like that bit there is just far too vague. Or I wish they would change this section because it would make it easier for property owners. Or the speed of doing such and such, it's so infuriating. Is there any things you wish you had a magic wand to change?
Probably yeah, there's quite a few things that I would like to change, but whether they ever would. I mean, one of the things that's always, I mean, all the incentives that brought in by the government are
Hmm.
to encourage growth, encourage new investment.
Hmm.
But a lot of the properties that we look at are historical acquisitions.
Yeah,
So there's not a lot of sort of tax relief and sort of incentives for existing property owners, which is fair enough. Obviously, you know that they're trying to build the economy and allowing tax relief on existing sort of properties isn't going to help with that.
hmm,
But I think as well with capital allowances, a lot of companies post COVID are struggling and aren't profit making. And the problem with capital allowances is all they can do is reduce your tax liability.
hmm.
If you're a loss making company, you're not paying tax.
Yeah.
All capital allowances will do is increase that loss. So there's no immediate benefit to capital allowances if you are a loss making company.
Hmm.
With research and development, you can get tax credits for the sort of expenditure you incur that qualifies. So one of my sort of pushes would be to have some sort of tax credit available for capital allowances. If you've got a loss-making company and you incur qualifying costs on capital allowances, I think there should be some sort of tax credit available for that for companies to reinvest in the economy and in their business to obviously try and grow it. There's the incentive is there.
Yeah.
Whether that would ever come out, I don't know, but that's the sort of main one for me that I would like to see come in.
Right.
But like I say, I could just be wishing.
The desire for the magic wand. See, all we need to do is try and rewind the budget today and put you in charge. You know, we can see what happens.
Yeah, superimpose me onto Jeremy Hunt's body and
Holding the
see how we
case.
do.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So, in Bonham and Brook, just to kind of wrap that part of the puzzle up, all the links are there for folks to get in touch. You guys are you're spread across different parts of the UK. You've even got places in the States as well. So, anyone within the UK can get in touch with you. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've got
Yeah.
our head office is in London,
Yep.
but we've got offices in Manchester, which is where I am, and we've got another office in Glasgow. And like I say, we've also got an office in North Carolina that we've recently set up there and branching out into the US. So, and yeah, we cover all the UK. So any sort of property located in the UK that we will have a look at.
Outstanding. No matter how big or how small, you can have a look at it and pour your Sherlock Holmes eyes over it.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Tremendous stuff. Absolutely brilliant, Mark. There you go, folks. You see, it wasn't scary. It wasn't a big dark art. You know, this man's here to help you. You know, you can have this money sitting on the table, and you've got the asset. Maybe you're about to buy it. Maybe you have bought it. Maybe you've worked on it. Maybe you've refurbished it. You know, that money is due to you. You know that the government has put it in place. Let's paint them in a good light. They have put things in place to help you. You know, to give you relief. You're paying tax. Well done, you. But you can get tax relief. So why not grab an expert who actually knows how to do that? Who's that guy? It's this guy, Mark Anthistle from Bonham and Brook. So Mark, for today, for everything you're doing, thanks a million, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.